Right, Joe, tip number 3, please.
Right, this is very much a maths tip. Okay, so this is use calculators from the earliest opportunity. So day 1 of year 7, get your students using calculators.
And I'll tell you what, let's broaden this out a bit, right? Because science will be loving this as well, right? You know, anything, a bit of geography, they've not ruled it out.
Yeah, and it's interesting in science because it's, you know, I feel like the maths department takes responsibility for calculators in the school. We're the ones who make sure, in my school, perhaps not in all, we're the ones who make sure that every student has a calculator, and there's very different ways of doing that depending on what kind of context your school's in. But we make sure everyone has a calculator, we make sure they bring it every day, and then science kind of piggyback off that, don't they? Because they're using them quite a lot. But, you know, we really have to ensure that calculator usage becomes really fluent. Because what you end up with, and I think we've all seen it, if you've got some experience in teaching maths, you'd have seen that quite sometimes they get to their GCSE exam and they've got 2 calculator papers, 1 non-calculator. So we have majority calculator work going on. And they'll have a question like, increase £210 by 35% or something. And you'll see them do like a build-up method for finding that 35%, and they've got a calculator in front of them. And they could do it in a second, because they know how to use a multiplier and they've got a calculator. But they're not reaching for their calculator because they haven't got the habit of doing that in schools where it's not been built up as a habit since year 7. And actually it's something I really work hard on. So in my school, every student is constantly using their calculator, and occasionally we'll have a lesson where I'll say, look, we're doing fractions today, so calculator's away, because this will normally be on the non-calculator paper, and I need you to know how to do this without a calculator. So I won't say calculator's away, I'll just say you're not using your calculator today. But other than that, like 95% of lessons, they've got their calculator on the desk and they're just using it fluently. They're picking it up to check things, they're picking it up when they need it. I just think it's my students, I'm hoping, when they get to their year 11 exams, will not forget they can use their calculator because they're so used to using it. And obviously they don't use it at primary school anymore. That changed on the national curriculum. So now calculators come in year 7. It's massively engaging to get them using them. They love using calculators. And I get that there are really good reasons why schools can't do or think they can't do it. You know, there are you've got lots of pupil premium students, and you're saying that they can't afford calculators. In which case, there's the head of maths needs to be going to SLT and saying, I need a big chunk of that pupil premium budget that has been assigned to those students exactly for this sort of thing, so I can buy a set of calculators for every class, and they can use them in the lessons, if not at home. I think it's really important that we heads of maths are making sure that pupil premium budget is being used appropriately, and buying calculators is a brilliant use of that budget. And then there'll be some schools where it's not so much they can't afford them, but the behaviour is not good enough, or there isn't a system in place to make sure they bring them. And in which case, you just need to tackle these problems rather than ignore them. Like, you just need to find a way of making sure that every student has a calculator in every lesson.
Love it, Joe. I have 5 things to say about this before I hand back over to you. Yeah, just been scribbling them down. So the first is, I don't know if you find this, I find it's the lowest achieving students who are the worst at using their calculator, and they're the ones who need it most. So to use your example there of finding 35% of 200, you'll get a student who mentally that's going to be a real challenge for them to do kind of on paper and stuff, but they're the ones who'll do it on paper, whereas they're the ones who benefit most from using their calculator. And it always does matter when you mark a non-calculator like foundation paper, a calculator foundation paper, the amount of mental methods that have been used, written methods that have been used, is just mind-blowing. Yeah,
I mean, sometimes you'll see in a calculator paper they've done like long multiplication or long division at the side and got it wrong, and you think, why are you doing that? I'm rude. Use a calculator capitals when I mark it. But and it's like there's people. I think some people are a little bit precious about. Yeah. Well, no, if they use a calculator too much, they're not going to practice their arithmetic. Yeah. But there's plenty of opportunities for them to practice arithmetic, and they do a lot of arithmetic practice at primary school. And there's been some research recently that does show that using calculators at secondary school can really assist the broad range of math skills. So it's not hindering them in any way. I think there's a little bit of a... It's almost like people think that students can't become over-reliant on calculators because then they'll stop using their brain. But absolutely not. Like, the calculator helps them to... Oh, no, it doesn't help them. it opens up a whole new load of maths to them, so they get to actually do the important maths and not be bogged down in all this arithmetic that's, it gets them to focus on the right things if they've got a calculator to hand.
That's good, right? So that's point one. Point two, again, just a very quick one. Obviously, it's important the kids use the same calculator, right? We've all seen this. Kids coming in with bizarre models of calculator that the grannies lent them or whatever, and then the one they get given in the exam, if they don't have it, is just a completely different model and they don't have a clue how to do it. That's obviously, it goes without saying. But this is one, you've changed my opinion on this, Joe. I know you're calculator obsessed, and as a result, I'm a bit calculator obsessed now. So I think your fractions example is a really interesting one. So in the past, I would never, like for the whole fractions unit, the kids would have never gone anywhere near their calculators, because I think, well, the whole point of fractions is you've got to be able to do it using written methods and so on. But now, even in something like addition of fractions, they would always use the calculator to check their answers.
Yeah, good idea.
And this goes back to there's two things here. One, it gets them fluent on their calculator.
Yeah.
But two, it goes back to what we were saying earlier on about having the answers available, right? Because again, they then have a bespoke answer at the point they're ready. They can check on their calculator. So, I can't see an occasion where I wouldn't want a child having a calculator in their lesson, as long as I can trust them, and the messaging's right, that obviously you're not going to always be able to use this in the exam, but let's get really fluent with this calculator, and it's your own private check, it's your own private set of answers, then I can only see benefits to that.
I agree, and it's interesting because I had some year 10s recently. We were doing some work on surds, and it was a question where it required a lot of manipulation of surds, and I did see some of them using the calculator to simplify the surds, and I said to them, like, it's good that you know how to do that on your calculator, but obviously this whole question would be on a non-calculator exam, so you just need to practice the simplifying of surds, and don't use your calculator to do that bit for you, because otherwise, you're not gonna know how to do it yourself. So there are times where you have to just sort of tell them. You need to have that maturity, don't you? Where it's like, I know you've got one on your desk, but you need to be mature enough to know that this won't benefit you if you use it for this particular thing.
Exactly.
But please do use it to check your answers. It's interesting about the fractions, because there's a test that when I give them their end of unit fractions test, we did it this year, and it was mixed in. The fractions test had another topic on it where you had to use a calculator, and so it was a pain because we had to write a fractions test where it was okay to have a calculator. So that was quite challenging. So we did things like it was a fraction division question, but it said you must show your method in full, do not use a calculator here, and that's fine. So then we can check their workings. But there was one question on there, and I gave her 1 mark for it. And it was multiplying two mixed numbers, and I said you may use a calculator for this one, and it was something like 1 1/3 multiplied by 5 2/5 or something. And as I expected, because this always happens, about half the class got it wrong. And even though it said use a calculator, it was a 1 mark question. And what they'd done wrong was even though I had actually told this class, I hadn't modelled it enough clearly. They don't know that shift and the fraction button gives them a mixed number. So, if you want to input 5 2/5 and use it in a calculation, you do shift fraction button, and it comes up with the 3 little boxes. If they don't know that, then what they do is they input like 5, and then they press the fraction button, and then they do their 2/5 or whatever, and that is actually giving them a 5 multiplied by 2/5, so you get totally the wrong answer out of it. And that's the sort of thing where it's such a basic thing, but so many students are not told about that.
No.
So many students are not told that if you want to input a mixed number, you need to do shift and the fraction button.
And again, it's probably because they haven't. Again, fractions is treated as a written topic, not a calculated topic.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I remember once I took over a class who'd been taught Pythagoras. No, it was they'd been taught area of a circle, and what I saw them doing was. They weren't using the square button. They were just doing, say, radius times radius. And it's not that they didn't know that it was radius squared, it's that they didn't know that they could use the square button. And you think, that's like, come on, show them how to use the square button. And this is, again, really good use of visualisers to model those techniques. So it's like, I'm modelling an area of a circle question, and I will literally tell you what buttons you should press in your calculator. And actually, this is another example, like you said, of where you can get and use a calculator to check answers. So, or to practice other bits of maths. So, for example, if I was teaching over a circle, then I might say, right, I want your answers in terms of pi.
Nice.
And then I also want your answer in decimal form, rounded to 2 decimal places. And so they have to know how to do 16 times pi on their calculator, which again needs modelling because pi is ridiculously hidden in a shift button for no reason. So you have to model that. You have to model the pressing the SD button to turn it into a decimal, and then you then need them to round it, which is testing another math skill. And in fact, you could even do that in a lesson on rounding in year 7 before they've even done circles, because you could say, right, we're going to do some rounding practice today, but we're going to do it by doing 16 times pi, press the SD button and round that number. So you could actually use that for rounding. Calculators are amazing because you get them to do a whole load of calculator stuff, round the answer, and the key topic in the lesson is practice rounding, but at the same time they're just practicing using their calculators and they're getting really used to using them. They've got the habit of using them.
Lovely stuff. Right, final 2 points on this. So the first thing to say is, I have a bit of a theory on this. You know how, obviously, the GCSE used to be one calc and one non-calc paper, and now it's one calc and 2 calculator papers. So it must be a nightmare, as you were saying, for the GCSE examiners to come up with all these questions where, well, yeah, it's hard, isn't it, to write a question where kids are allowed to use a calculator, but also they can't just kind of bang it straight into the calculator, if that makes sense. So I think that's a real challenge. And I think you can do a fair bit of paper 2 and 3 in the maths GCSE if you are a bit of a whiz on your calculator. Can you do some amazing stuff on the calculators these days, right? So obviously you can do all your tables of values stuff for plotting straight line graphs. You can do all your quadratic formula stuff. There's when you get to A level, you can do even more stuff. So I think it's a real wow moment when you show the kids. You teach them how to do it, using written methods, and then you say, right, now I'm going to show you how you can do this on your calculator. Now, as you say, you're not always going to have your calculator with you for doing this, but upskilling the kids to do some of the amazing functions that you can use on the calculator, I think is a really, really nice thing to do. And when you get slick on using your calculator, it's incredible, right, some of the stuff you can do.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is, I'm not massive. I'm a bit old-fashioned in a way.
Yeah, me too.
I like students to use calculators from early on, but I don't like it that more expensive calculators give advantages.
Yeah,
that
I agree.
really, really annoys me. So all of our students have the £10, the classic Casio that kind of everyone has now. But it frustrates me that they can have a graphical calculator and it can give them huge advantages, and that really, really annoys me.
I agree.
I just feel like it should be a level playing field.
But even the old, this old classic here, the class whiz,
so I call that the A-level class whiz.
Yeah, I mean, even that. The stuff you can do on that is mind-blowing these days, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But, like you say, a lot of students aren't taught these little things. And I think that the good example is the prime factorization. I had a group of students a couple of years ago, and they were tops at year 11. They're absolutely flying through practice just before the GCSE. And they had a question, and it said something like, it was asking them if a number was prime. And they had to know whether a number was prime. And it was a huge number. It was something like 700 and something, or I don't know, it was a really big number. And they got stuck on this bit of the question. It was a big problem-solving question, but they got stuck because they didn't know if that was prime. Now, they know how to check if a number's prime, but, that's going to take forever. So that's when I said, well, you do know the prime factorization button, don't you?
Yes.
I didn't know it. And I said, well, you can actually, and then the thing is, I said, it shows the prime factorization, but then they need the understanding to know whether that shows it's prime.
Yes.
So, if they're putting in a number and it's saying, so if you put in 16 and it comes up with 2 to the power of 4, that's clearly not a prime number because we've got these factors of 2. Whereas if we put in a number and try and use that button and it's just coming back with the same number, that's because it has no other factors to list. So it's a really powerful part of teaching prime factorization to get using that button and to look at what that tells you about numbers. But loads of students will never have seen that. And I don't think it offers a huge advantage knowing it in GCSE or A-level, but it does help build understanding. And it's just a really nice teaching tool for reasoning to do with primes.
Absolutely. And my final point about calculators, Joe, this goes back to something we were saying earlier as well. You've got to be able to visually show the kids the buttons that you as a teacher are pressing on the calculator. So whether you do this using an emulator or whether you bang it under the visualizer, it's not enough. I've done it if I'm stood at the front tapping and the kids have got different answers, and then I've got to then try and figure out why they've got the different answers, whereas a big old one on the board or stuck under the visualizer, it's the key, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's really interesting when they come out with a different answer on the calculator.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, it's like, oh, you just had to do, it might be a trig question and they had to do a closed bracket or something, or or quite often it's where they haven't squared a negative properly. And, there's common mistakes. So once you get experience, you can kind of say, if they say to you, Miss, I got a different answer, if you know what the common mistakes are, then you can say, just look at what's on your screen, because that's a good thing. These new calculators, the way I still think it's amazing that you can go back and see what they typed in.
Me too.
So I'll say, right, go, go use your cursor to go back, look at what you typed in. Did you put brackets around that -2 squared or whatever? Yeah. So it's that kind of thing where you get to the point where you can. As a teacher, you can predict where they're going to mess up on their calculator, and you can preempt that. But yeah, I absolutely agree. They need to see it modelled properly. And the emulators are expensive, or you can get them free if you buy. If you're going to buy calculators to sell or to give to your year group, you do get the emulators for free from Casio, or used to anyway. But yeah, if you don't have that, then absolutely a calculator onto a visualizer works wonders. But yeah, they actually, I'll literally say to them, type this in now. Check the number on your screen. Tell me if that's not what you've got, and I'll come to you. So I'm very specific and take the time to make sure that I haven't just told them to put it in a calculator, but I've checked they've got the right thing on their screen when they've done that.
Final word on calculators, Joe. We're old, me and you. Everybody knows that. I'm still blown away. A big game changer in the world of calculators for me was when fractions looked like fractions. Because when I was at school and stuff, it was the little L's, right? It was like, 2/3 was 2L3. It's like, and then whenever the calculators could do fractions, I was like, this is a game changer.
And I've still got students that we've got, this was ridiculous. Our uniform supplier put calculators on the website so that when parents were buying uniform in year 6, they were like, oh, there's a calculator on this website, we'll buy that.
Clever.
And it was like some Helix rubbish, like absolute nonsense. And so we have some students who obviously we've now told the uniform supplier to get rid of that because that's not the calculator we want to use. And then they join in year 7 and we say, right, you have to have this Casio. But yeah, any of my students that have got that rubbish calculator, when we get to fractions, they'll say to me, what's this on my screen? And I'll say, I'm so sorry you've got that calculator.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I am still, I'm still impressed with I love the way that it can go, that SD button. I don't know what people call it. I call it SD button.
Yeah.
I wish it had a proper name. Why does it say SD on it? But I like the way that if your answer's a mixed number, you can convert between mixed number, improper fraction, and decimal form just by pressing it. And I just love that because, like you say, the calculators from our day, and the order used to be different, didn't it? So I used to have to, with trig, I used to have to put in the angle and then press sign.
That's right. They were bad, hey? Sometimes I just press that SD button just for a bit of a laugh, just kind of flicking between. That makes me happy. And I should say, I don't think Helix are going to be sponsoring this podcast anytime in the future.
Sorry,
Helix. I don't
even know if it is Helix. I think it is.
Never mind.